So I think it's only fair, I would like to start with passing our sign-up sheet for Secretary of State around as well. Jamie, if you'll start it over there. I'm David Belle. It's good to be here today, and I am most recently the former mayor of Alpharetta. In fact, that's still kind of working through that. And I'll be honest with you, so I don't drive a fancy car. I drive a 2008 Jeep Liberty. My picture is not on any wall with a signature anywhere, and I don't really know, and I'm not friends with anyone famous. But I will say this: a mayor to a third grader is a rock star. And so when we go and we talk to these different kids in schools, when they come and do tours of City Hall, man, they get excited. In fact, I'll tell you real quick. So during the when my wife and I, we would come to see our kids at elementary school, and in fact, I've got my son here, Colton's here today, but I think this was Kaylee. So Candace and I were there in elementary school, and we're trying to help Kaylee with her lunch, and all of a sudden we hear yelled from the back of the room. It's like, "Hey, lady," he's talking to my wife. "Hey, lady, can you move? I can't see the mayor." I'm still hearing about that. But when I give those tours to the students, and we always end with this one question. It's like, if you were mayor, what would you do? And the things they come up with, some are very reasonable. One answer is like, well, I would keep everybody very safe. Wow, that sounds good. That's perfect. And others will say, well, I would eliminate all traffic. So I'd love to get the answer to that. And then sometimes they'll have things that are a little bit more imaginative. They'll say, well, man, I would love that if our pool had a lazy river, that would be great. Or if we had white water somehow, somewhere in Alpharetta. But they have all these answers, and the reason I point that out is it is very easy to put up a list of I wish we woulds. But the biggest thing and the hardest thing is to figure out, how do you get from I wish we would to I'm glad we did. As I mentioned, I'm David Belle. I'm a sixth-generation Georgian. I am a free market, pro-life Christian conservative. And I don't want to just throw out the Christian label. I want to also point out I am a follower of Christ. I am a business owner. I own Hypes & Belle, which is a law firm in downtown Alpharetta. I am a 20-year husband to an amazing wife. And I am the son of a Boy Scout and a ballerina. Product of Gainesville, Georgia, the poultry capital of the world. That's where I grew up. Also have been proud to be mayor of Alpharetta, the technology city of the South. And I'm also very proud to be running for Secretary of State in the most irresistible state in these United States. And so the question, though, that I want to kind of address today is that question of how do you get from I wish we would to I'm glad we did. Now, if you forget everything else that I say today, everything that I say is going to fit into two categories, and that is defeat voter fraud and champion Georgia jobs. That's what I'm running to do, is defeat voter fraud and champion Georgia jobs. And so when you look at the Secretary of State's office, the most important role there is the elections role, and I wanted to share with you some of what we want to do. There's a lot of people talking, a lot of people write about what they would consider the back door of voter fraud. A lot of times in those instances, they're talking about voter security, they're talking about data security. But the front door of voter fraud is actually the absentee ballot. Now, when you go to vote in person, whether it's the early vote or whether it's whether you vote on election day, that's what I like to do. You have to present your photo ID, and we're very proud of it. But if you vote absentee, you do not need a photo ID. You don't need a notary, you don't need a witness, and you don't need an excuse. And when you look out at the incidents of voter fraud across the country, in fact, Florida has documented instances where essentially they would order absentee ballots for an entire street. They would monitor when those ballots come in, and then they would send a team in and apply high-pressure tactics to get people to vote for their candidate, even though they didn't order the absentee ballot. In New Jersey, they took it a step further, and in addition to that, they would actually pay you for the absentee ballot, and as a courtesy, they would fill it out for you and send it in. There are also instances involving nursing homes and other places here in Georgia where absentee ballots were ordered by a third party and yet filled out even if those folks did not yet have the competency to vote. And so that's got to stop. We need to bring a photo ID to the absentee ballot. The other thing is I believe only U.S. citizens should vote in U.S. elections. Absolutely. It is easier than you think. So here's the thing. In Georgia, in 2010, we passed, the state legislature passed the Proof of Citizenship Act, and we're glad they did. But now it is 2018, and that Proof of Citizenship Act has yet to be implemented. And here's what that means. So if you get a voter registration form, and we actually have them in our city hall. If you get a voter registration form, and on block 5, you've got 3 options. You can put your driver's license number down. If not, you can put your social security number down, or you can check the 3rd box on the far right that says you have neither a driver's license number or a social security number. And guess what? If you fill the rest of the form out and turn it in, you will be registered to vote whether you are a U.S. citizen or not. And that's got to stop. We need to implement the Proof of Citizenship Act. The other thing, now there's been a lot of talk of machines, and I am not an advocate of any particular manufacturer, but I am an advocate of a particular functionality. And so the system that I would like to see in place, and I do believe that the next Secretary of State is going to have a great deal of input into that next system. The system that I would like to see in place is one that where you present your photo ID, you get essentially a piece of card stock, you submit it into that machine, and you vote electronically, just like you do today. But when you hit cast ballot, it prints it out onto that ballot. You're able to visually verify that the vote you intended is the vote that has been printed out. And then you submit it to a second machine, which makes a scan and a photocopy of that vote, and also stores the physical copy, what I consider and should be the vote of record. And that's what we need in Georgia. This produces not only better voter security, but also better voter confidence. Because voter security is certainly the most important aspect of it, but voter security is only so good if the people who voted aren't sure that that's their mayor, that that's their state representative, that that's their state senator. They have to have confidence in the process. And so that's what I want to do to defeat voter fraud. And so when you look out at the state of Georgia, and you see an amazing state. We're the #1 state to do business in. We're proud of that. We should be proud of that. But when you look out at the state of Georgia, there is 85 of the 159 counties in the state of Georgia are projected to lose both jobs and population by the year 2030. Agriculture is the biggest industry in the state of Georgia. It's $75 billion per year. But 2 years ago, the average farmer was 59. And today, the average farmer is 60 years old. The cost of entry into that industry is too high. You've got subsidies that have driven up the cost of land. You've got double regulation at the federal level and the state level, especially in the environmental area. And you've got farmers that are telling their children not to get into agriculture. And we've never even heard the idea of a first-generation farmer. But I believe that there's an opportunity to reduce the regulations when it comes to agriculture, to be the #1 ag tech state in the country, which I think will produce a lot of opportunity all across the state of Georgia. I think we have an opportunity to try things that have worked in other fields like technology, like a farm incubator. I think there's opportunities in southeast and southwest Georgia to actually bring investors into our farms and into our farmers to create more opportunities. We have a tremendous amount of water down in southeast and southwest Georgia, and we've got a low cost of living. There's opportunity to build on that. And then you look at technology. Now, Alpharetta is a technology city of the South, and we're proud to be so. But when you look at the state of Georgia, the future of technology in Georgia is going to depend on our ability to attract new venture capital dollars, new investment dollars into the new ideas and new software. And when you look out at the state, as the country as a whole, the dollars that are invested in new technology, 75% of those dollars go to California, to Massachusetts, and New York. And yet they have a higher tax burden, a higher cost of living, and we have a better quality of life. I believe there's an opportunity to start linking together the innovation centers and the incubators across the state of Georgia, identifying the best players in information security and fintech and health IT and ag tech, and bringing investors in those first 3 states I mentioned to Georgia, and also just selling Georgia to these other places where we have those investors, because I believe that we can compete. And then you look at logistics. Forbes magazine says we need 1.4 million logistic workers in 2018, and that's something that we do well in Georgia. We have the port, we have the busiest airport in the world, we have UPS and Delta, and yet we have not yet become the best in logistics. And I think that's a prime opportunity to start helping areas outside the metro Atlanta area. And so you say, well, you're running for Secretary of State. Why do you bring this up? And I'll tell you this, for Secretary of State, whether it's in making improvements in security and defeating voter fraud, whether it involves licensing, whether it involves corporations, whether it involves securities, those things, let me just tell you, the Secretary of State's office is a hat-in-hand position. It's a beggar's position. I don't mean any disrespect to the office. It's an important office, but it has very little authority and very few resources. And it sounds to me a lot like mayor, because that's exactly what you have as a mayor. There's nothing you can do as a mayor by yourself. I can't even pass a budget unless I get 3 other council members on board with me. But what we've been able to do in Alpharetta has been about being able to cast a vision that is beyond the authority and the resources of that office. So the question of how do you get from I wish we would to I'm glad we did, here's what we did in Alpharetta. In Alpharetta, when we first started looking out, and I remember sitting in my first week as mayor in what felt like my predecessor's office. I remember the wallpaper had some kind of 80s stripes on it, and there was some gold chrome that went around the office. And I remember thinking, okay, I've made a lot of promises. How do we get there? And so we started actually engaging in what we do best in the industry that we do best in Alpharetta, which is technology. We had real and honest conversations. And then I began to cast a vision about what could and should be for the city of Alpharetta. And what we ultimately were able to do, we were able to lead leaders to bring Alpharetta forward, an entire city, an entire community forward. And by leading leaders, we were able to make the case and land a technical college. By leading leaders, we were able to create and launch a technology incubator, which now serves over 50 technology companies. And by leading leaders, we were able to make the case for a conference center that can now serve up to 1,500 people. By leading leaders, we were able to reinvent our downtown. By leading leaders, we were able to create and take an environment that was 85 acres of dirt to turn it into what is now called Avalon. By leading leaders, we've grown now to over 640 technology companies, and we've added over 12,000 new technology jobs in the last 5 years. By leading leaders, we've become the technology city of the South. So how do you get from I wish we would to I'm glad we did? You pick a leader who's already wished and who's already did. And so when we look out, and you can imagine what it would be like if those 85 counties that are projected to lose jobs by 2030 and population by 2030, what if it wasn't true? What if we could change that? What if we could figure out how to remove the cost of entry of agriculture? And we were talking about people who were new first-generation farmers whose mother was a teacher and whose dad was an insurance agent. And what if we are able to figure out ways to where California is wondering why their investment dollars are going to this state in the South called Georgia? I think we can do that. Now, when you look out, when you have on May 22nd, I don't know how many days it is to the election, it's 64, somewhere in that range, but you're going to find yourself in that voting booth, and you're going to find on the Republican side that you're going to have 4 choices for Secretary of State. Now, as an elected official, there are 2 types of elected officials. There are lawmakers and there are executives. And there's nothing wrong with either one, they're just 2 different skill sets. But you have 3 lawmakers in this competition and you have 1 executive. And a lawmaker changes laws, but a mayor changes the map. If we're going to make something out of the Secretary of State's office and do something that even the constitutional duties, there's barely enough there to do with resources to do those constitutional duties. But if we're going to be able to move an entire state forward, then we need someone who has done it before. I'm the only one running for Secretary of State who will be ready day one to run a multidisciplined organization because I have. I'm the only one running for Secretary of State who has run or knows how to run both a government and a business because I have. I'm the only one running for Secretary of State who has been able to accomplish goals beyond the authority and beyond the resources of our office because I have. And so if you think that Georgia could do better, because here's the thing, I'm not running just simply to make a better Secretary of State's office for Georgia. I'm not running to be an election law attorney. I'm an attorney, but I'm not running to be the Secretary of State's election law attorney. I'm running to make a better Georgia through the Secretary of State's office. And I would love for your help. There's an opportunity to get behind us, to help us. We have yard signs here today. We'd love for you to sign up on our email list. We have a great phone bank opportunity. We'd love for you to join us, and we can do something for every Georgian everywhere and look at the Secretary of State's office in a way it has never been looked at before. So I hope you'll join us. Thank you for having me. Glad to take any questions.
Joseph Stalin said it's not the people who vote that count, it's the people who count the votes. What would you do about that aspect of voter fraud, particularly as it relates to some of the urban cores within the state?
Well, I do think that the system that I talked about, I like the idea of having redundancy. Right now we have one record of the vote, which is an electronic vote. And I'll be honest with you, even though I know enough about our system, and I've been told that it is a secure system, and I'm certainly not aware of any major voter fraud that has happened through our current system. I get uneasy when I cast a ballot, and now it's an electronic copy that no one can actually verify that my vote is what it is. And so I think one of the first things we do by having that redundancy, by having two separate electronic copies, one the same format that we have, another being a photocopy of the physical vote, and then a third being the actual paper physical version of that vote, it doesn't make cheating impossible, but it makes it harder. And I think those three different systems, and I also think that Georgia's system, by the way, needs to be unique from all other states, so I do not support the federal government being in charge of our elections. But I think that's the start of it, though. Having we'll call it a three-tier system that is redundant, but at the same time, three different systems of recording that vote will help a lot. But I also think it's going to involve training with the boards of elections. With this new system, what I would do with it is I would start it with the best third of our counties that do it well, because not every county performs their elections the best way. And then the second year, I would move to the second best group of counties, and eventually I would get to Fulton and DeKalb. Yes, ma'am.
A few years ago, my husband went to vote, and they wouldn't let him because they said he already passed his vote. What would you do about that sort of issue?
Well, I mean, obviously, I don't know what caused that, but there is the process for that is to vote in a provisional ballot, and then to investigate why there's already a recording of that vote. But obviously, that would be concerning. The first thing I would do is talk to that board of elections. I do think, back to this system, and it could have been an absentee ballot issue, to be honest with you, now that I think about it. That's what happens oftentimes. But, the fact is that if we can get a photo ID for the absentee ballot, we get this system employed, there's less opportunity for that. But I don't know what would have caused it, but the provisional ballot is the way to go ahead and preserve that vote and then go ahead and figure out why his name has already been checked off as having voted. Yes, sir.
How would you do photo ID absentee definition or not there?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I would do, so the absentee ballot is a two-step process. One is the application for the absentee ballot. You'll find those everywhere, including, I know it's in our city hall and probably various libraries. And the other part is the actual voting. So I would require, and this is what Kansas does, is that they require that you provide either a scan or a photocopy of that driver's license on the application phase of it, which means that only someone who at least had access to their photo ID is able to order that ballot. Yes, sir.
I know a lot of business owners, and we have a lot of candidates in all different offices running, and they're talking about making our community better, our state better, blah, blah, blah. And when you said something about leading leaders, do you believe the government's role, is it to lead a business by dangling a financial carrot in front of them, or to get out of their way?
Well, oftentimes it's getting out of the way. When I'm talking about leading leaders, I'm not talking about regulating leaders. I just wanted to define that.
No, I'm talking about financially helping the leaders. Is that part of that?
Well, the Secretary of State doesn't have any resources to do that. And when we led with respect to the technology and creating the state's first technology commission, what we did is we cast a vision that was enticing because they knew it would grow their industry and their business in the city of Alpharetta. So we didn't have tax breaks to give. We didn't have a whole lot of financial regulations or anything to give them as a carrot, other than saying, look, I'm willing to get in front if you guys will help us. And that's the thing. This was not something that was possible through a 7-member council. This is something that required a vision that people who didn't have to get on board with got on board with. And that's what has led to the successes in Alpharetta. Yes, sir.
About 3 or 4 years ago, my identity was stolen. And when I went to renew my firearms carry license, I was flagged. They knew about it. I had to go in person and prove who I was. Now, if the local magistrate knows all of these things, and I guess I'm asking, why can't we have a system that's that good with our voting system? And I don't even know if there's any correlation between ID theft and voter fraud or not. Maybe you know something about that.
Yeah, I don't know that. Obviously, if you've stolen someone's ID, you can vote on their behalf. Don't do that. But in terms of, but I do think that there is they're connected in that the harm can come through a stolen ID, but I don't know that identity theft can be stopped through better voter security. Well, let me just, I forgot to mention, in Cherokee County, I used to work here, and we're proud to have the support of Mayor Miller of Holly Springs, Mayor Hobgood of Canton, Mayor Enriquez of Woodstock, Mayor Roberts of Ball Ground, and also my good friend Senator Beach, who represents both Alpharetta and Cherokee County. This is an incredible county. There's a lot of success here, and we would love to be a part of that, not only for your county, but for the state of Georgia. So thank you so much.